Welcome to Book Time with Ryan. I am Ryan, and today I'm doing a vlog about the Bobbitt case. You decide. I am at one of the more prominent features in the Manassas, Virginia area, the first Battle of Manassas battlefield. You can also see the second Battle of Manassas battlefield. This is the first battle of the Civil War. It's really what Manassas is known for. It's also known as the Battle of Bull Run. But something else happened in Manassas. What am I talking about? I, of course, am talking about the Bobbitt trial of 1993-1994. This is the incident where Lorena Bobbitt cut off the penis of her husband, John Bobbitt. Now, just to provide a little bit of context and a little bit of background, 1993, I was probably 9 or 10 years old, and to a 9 and 10-year-old, we weren't really thinking of abuse or the background around this. It was really just some guy got his penis cut off, or as we would call it back then, their wiener got cut off. And when I was looking at the book that I've been reading for the last week, the Bobbitt case, You Decide, I kind of came at it with that mindset, that like 9 or 10-year-old mindset of, man, somebody got their penis cut off. That's gross. I can't believe that happened. But the more I read, the more disturbing it was, and the sadder it was, because there was a lot of abuse and a lot of bad stuff. And there's going to be quite a few triggers in this, so that's kind of your heads up now. But I moved to the Northern Virginia area, and I was not aware that this thing that I experienced with everyone else in the country in 1993, 30 years ago, happened in Manassas. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the case, and I'm going to talk about where things happened, and I'm going to drive around Manassas to the actual locations where different things happened. I'm going to wake up, and I'm going to drive from the Bobbitt's apartment to the ER where John Bobbitt had his penis reattached. I'm going to show you where the penis was thrown by Lorena Bobbitt. And a lot of this is going to be at night, not all of it. I'm going to show you the courthouse where this stuff happened and really kind of give you a feel for where things went. Behind me is the court that the trial was held at. This is the judicial complex. It serves Prince William County, Manassas Park, and the city of Manassas. Now, the interesting thing about this book is it starts with the verdicts. John Wayne Bobbitt charged sexual assault, verdict not guilty. That was not the actual case that was heard in this book. This book was about Lorena Bobbitt. She was charged with malicious wounding, verdict not guilty by reason of temporary insanity. So, right off the bat when you're reading this, although people were following it in the news too, you know that she's found not guilty by reason of temporary insanity. The rest of the book is really establishing that verdict. So you're kind of starting in reverse. You know what happens, and now you're asked to kind of weigh the facts on your own to determine what you think was the right choice. I think it's what's really helpful in making that kind of call, that judgment, is to understand some of the background too, because this incident did not happen because of one thing. This was a toxic relationship over years with a number of bad things happening, and this was kind of the culmination of that. Lorena Bobbitt was born in Ecuador, and when she was 5, her parents moved to Venezuela for a better life. When she was around 16 years old, her parents gave her the gift of visiting the United States. And when it was time for them to go back, they wanted to stay, but her father couldn't get a work visa, so they returned, but Lorena wanted to stay, and she convinced her parents to let her stay. I think what was conveyed in the book was that her mom thought that she would spend a couple weeks and then be lonely and come back, but she did. She stayed with a family, and a family that was also from South America, and they became like her second family. She grew up in a very strict Catholic family, a close family. She was fairly sheltered. She never dated before she moved to the United States. And even when she was dating in the United States, which was really just a John Bobbitt, her dates were, there was always a chaperone of one or both of the daughters of the family she was staying with. She was very religious. She's against abortion, felt that marriage was final. Any kind of breakdown in the family unit was the fault of the woman, the wife. And it was really the woman's job to be the backbone of the family. So she's in the United States, learning English, and the family she's staying with takes her to a ball or a party at Quantico Marine Corps Base. They go to the enlisted club, the enlisted Marine Club, and she falls in love with John Bobbitt. And he calls the next day, and they start dating. Now, their dates were chaperoned, and there wasn't really any indication there was any kind of abuse, mistreatment, really anything. They had this relationship, and it progressed. And after 10 months, they decided that they should get married. It was advised against that by a number of people, but they decided it's time to get married. And from there, things really start to fall apart because John becomes extremely abusive, sexually, physically, emotionally, and she sticks with it, but it gets worse and worse and worse. He's beating her. She's showing up with bruises. She starts to become more and more depressed at her work. She's less engaged. She gets very tense when John Bobbitt's around. John Bobbitt's not working, so she's working extra time to get more money to pay for things, and a number of times they separate. It's not always clear from the testimony if it was just John beating her all the time or if she also responded with physical aggression. But the thing was, she was 90 pounds and John was almost double that. So, really the bulk of the damage is going to be done by John either way. They separate a few times. Continues to abuse her. He begins to rape her. He actually anally rapes her. She cries, she bleeds, and he kind of holds that over her head for the rest of their marriage, that if she doesn't give him the sex he wants, that then he'll just take it with anal sex. So she really feels endangered. She reports it a number of times, the abuse that she's experiencing. There's some counseling that happens at the Marine Corps base. John doesn't really learn. I mean, every time he beats her, he kind of says, like, I won't do it again, I'm so sorry, and then does it again. So nothing really gets better. You come to a point where Lorena knows that she's got to be done with it. And she starts looking into divorce attorneys, getting evidence for the divorce. There's some concern about her green card and being deported if she doesn't get the evidence she needs to show that she's been beaten. The doctor in the case, the number of doctors, they all agree that she was suffering from extreme depression, major depression. I don't know what the term was. Some of them also believe that most of them believe that she was also suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. And some also believe that she was experiencing battered wife syndrome. That's where we find ourselves the night of June 22nd into the 23rd. She's kind of at the end of her rope, and she's made the moves to get out of the relationship, but she suffers another humiliation that night. In looking at the case that would follow and the arguments, no one really justifies John Bobbitt's actions. They think he was essentially a piece of shit. He was abusing her and raping her. Nobody believes that Lorena Bobbitt didn't cut off his penis. She admitted to it. Apparently it was a good cut too, and could have killed him. Nobody disagrees with that. The case here hinged on the fact that she do it maliciously. From what I've read, I think that it was probably heat of the moment. not only did he rape her, but when she confronted him after the fact and he was drunk and sleeping, he basically said, "I don't give a shit about you." And maybe that's the point where it was the final straw. Not only had he raped her, but there's no remorse, and he's treating her subhuman. The question really hinged on, did she remember it? Was she in a moment of psychosis where she couldn't resist the urge to cut off his penis? I'm not convinced that she really blacked out. I think it was heat of passion kind of thing, but I don't know about the other stuff. And really, in my mind, it did not matter as much because he was a piece of shit. Now, should she have cut off his penis? No. But it's one of those things that I think now we refer to as fuck around and find out. And I think he had been fucking around for quite some time, and he really found out that night. Was it legal? No. Was she crazy? I don't know. The nice thing about this book is you get the closing arguments, so you get everything summed up by both defense and the prosecutors, which is really a nice way to end the book. I'm not really convinced either way. Now, the thing about that is the burden is on the Commonwealth, the state, to prove that she was guilty. And the fact that I came away after reading 461 pages, I was still having questions, to me shows that the burden has not been met. There is some reasonable doubt there. I talked about when I was thinking about doing this video how there are a lot of ways that you can kind of make this, not a joke necessarily, but you can hit on some of the themes that would kind of be funny if it wasn't a true story. But the problem is, once you start reading the case, it is a true story. This is a woman who was beat, who was raped, who was essentially forced to have an abortion over and over and over and over again. Not the abortion, one abortion, but beaten, raped over and over again. And when you see that, it's really hard to make light of it, because you shouldn't. I mean, when you're a 9-year-old kid hearing about a wiener getting chopped off, that's one thing. But now as a 40-year-old reading about it, it's really disturbing. And this was an event that really, I think, changed some of the discussion. This is pre-Me Too, obviously. It's 30 years ago. But I think this was one of those instances where the conversation really changed, and there was a focus more on battered women and the rights of the women, and what is the out when you're being raped and beat by your husband and he really hasn't experienced a true reckoning. And I think this case really brought a lot of that to the forefront of discussions around the country. So where a 9-year-old may have been focused on the penis amputation, the wiener amputation, as we would have said as 9-year-old, I think the rest of the country was really looking at the fact that this was a woman who was beat, and yes, she dismembered her husband, which is very extreme and could have killed him. But where do you draw the line? Certainly sensationalized stuff. People were going around the country talking about it. It was a press fiasco, and there was an area just for the press around this courthouse. I don't know where it was. I'll see if I can find out really quickly, but I tried to figure out where was the building that the press used during it, and I can't determine that for sure. I thought it might be this one. This is the only one around that's unoccupied and looks like it's been unoccupied for a while. I think this was part of the judicial complex at some point, related to a jail or administrative building. It's crumbling now, but maybe that's what it was. I can't confirm that. I don't know yet. Everything else around is occupied, and probably by businesses or government organizations that would have been here for the long haul. On a Sunday in June, John Bobbitt's friend, Robbie, came into town. And he was coming into town just to look for some jobs. He decided that if he got here in the Manassas and it was easy to find something, he would be here for a day or two. If he couldn't find anything, maybe a week or two, but he wasn't here he wasn't considering staying permanently. He was really looking for a job and seeing what's available. He was going to stay with John and Lorena Bobbitt in their one-bedroom apartment. That did not go over well with Lorena. On Monday, John went to work. He was working at a company as a truck loader, and Robbie accompanied him to work and worked with him. It was Monday. On Tuesday in the morning, they did that again. John Bobbitt had started working at a nightclub called Legends, and apparently Legends was right across from their neighborhood. I don't think it exists anymore. I think there might be a car lot. But at the time, there was a Legends nightclub in the area, and he was working there. Kind of training, I think, within the week. He had just started. Well, he and Robbie went there to see what kind of work John would have, and he found out that on Tuesday there just wasn't enough going on, so he didn't need to come in to work. Well, Robbie and John went back to the house and said, we're going to go out and get some drinks and go bar hopping, which they started out at Legends and went to other bars. Lorena was still at work at the nail sculptor in Centerville. John was kind of like, let's get out of here before Lorena gets back so she doesn't hassle us. Well, they go out bar hopping. Lorena comes back from work. She goes to bed. And around 3 a.m., John and Robbie return home. They're drunk. They ate at Denny's. I'm not sure where this Denny's is, but there's one on Sudley Road in Manassas. So that could be Denny's, but there might be one that's closer to them. I'm not sure. Well, they were drunk. I don't know how they made it. Apparently they said that they had 5 beers and a couple B-52 shots. It seemed like they were out long enough that they probably had more than that, but I don't know. So they get home. John makes up Robbie's bed. Robbie's sleeping on a fold-out couch in the living room. John goes into his bedroom, gets undressed, finds Lorena Bobbitt sleeping. Lorena kind of wakes up, asks him if he had work. John said he didn't have any work at Legends, and he kind of goes to sleep. Well, he gets frisky. He starts touching Lorena. She's asleep. He's kind of asleep. He rolls on top of her and holds her down and raped her. She does not want to have sex, but he wants to. He's drunk. He says he doesn't remember much and that he just couldn't stay awake. That was his side of the story. Her side of the story was that he rolled on top of her, pulled off her underwear, started having sex with her. She didn't want to, but there wasn't a whole lot she could do about it. He completed the act and went to sleep. Lorena was crying. She got up, went to the kitchen to get water. She was thinking about everything that had happened and got cold water out of the fridge, turned around and saw a knife, a Ginsu knife, sitting on the counter. She went into the bedroom where John was sleeping. She said, John, why did you do this to me? I'm just gonna get a little graphic here. She said, did you come inside me? He said, yes. And she said, why? It hurts. Why'd you do this? And he said, I don't care. Shut up. I'm going to sleep. He pushed her away. She said, how could you do this to me? She felt violated, and she cut him, and she severed his penis. This is where she says that she can't remember anything. She blacked out, kind of. Actually, before that, right before that, when she got the knife and she walked in the bedroom, she said she couldn't remember anymore. She leaves the house. She's holding the penis and the knife. She grabs her pocketbook. She grabs, for some reason, a Nintendo Game Boy of Robbie's, which was just sitting near there, and she had already grabbed $100 from his wallet. She leaves. She still says that she's out of it. She pulls out of Maplewood Apartments. I think she turns right out of Maplewood Apartments, and she suddenly kind of comes to and realizes she can't steer well because she's holding a penis. She rolls down the window, throws the penis into a field. We will go to that field. I'll show you where that field is the next day. So this is 3 a.m. So this is the 23rd of June. But later that day, police will come and find it. So I'll show you during the day where the field is. And she's trying to go to her place of work, 4 a.m., thinking people are going to be there. She's having a psychotic event. She's disoriented by time, because obviously no one's going to be at her work at 4 a.m. So she goes there, goes into her place of work with a key. Nobody's there. She calls the owner's house, doesn't get anybody, and then drives to the house. While she's at her place of work, she realizes she's still holding the knife. So she throws that in the trash can outside of the nail place, and then she goes to her friend's house. They call the police, and she goes in to Prince William Police Headquarters in Manassas. John wakes up when his penis is cut off. He's in a lot of pain, obviously. And he goes to Robbie. It's about 4 a.m. He goes to Robbie and he says, Robbie, he's naked. John's naked. He's holding himself. There's nothing there. It's bleeding a lot. Robbie is probably kind of still drunk, maybe. He still has had like an hour or two of sleep. An hour of sleep. He wakes up. He thinks for some reason that John's come to get him to go to work. So Robbie goes into the bathroom and he starts to brush his teeth. John walks in. Robbie sees him in the mirror and sees that he's bleeding all over the place. And it's a shock to Robbie. Robbie realizes he needs to take his friend to the doctor. Well, John goes in and grabs something to wear, and he's bleeding a lot. Robbie gets in the car and takes John to Prince William Hospital. Prince William Hospital has a different name now, but it still exists. So what I'm going to do is drive the path that I think that they probably went on to the hospital, to the ER. Robbie takes John to the ER. He has no penis. He's losing blood. He ends up losing a lot of blood. And I wanted to do this at the time that they did it, just to give you an idea for the traffic. Now, obviously things have changed. It's been 30 years. There's more buildings. There's probably more traffic. But it's right now it's 3:56 a.m. And I'm going to drive from their apartment to the ER entrance and give you a feel for what that looks like at this hour.
Drive you through
She grabbed her purse, a Game Boy, $100. Still had the penis and the knife in her hands, and she left her unit and went out to her car, pulled out of the parking lot, and turned right. She went probably 100 yards and then threw the penis out into a field right next to a daycare. If you're gonna throw a penis somewhere, please don't throw it next to a daycare. Fortunately, it was early in the day, so there weren't any kids around, and I believe it was probably found before kids would have been there anyway. Pretty random, but Santa showed up with Mrs. Claus while I was visiting the apartment complex. After Lorena pulled out of her neighborhood, she drove down the street on Maplewood Drive. She took a right probably. And down the street, maybe 100, 200 yards, she threw the penis into a field. There's a house there now. Later, when the police were looking for it, she had reported to the police that she had thrown the penis somewhere near the stop sign at Old Centerville Road and Maplewood Drive. They found out that the penis was actually in probably about 45 feet, 100 feet up from there in a field next to a daycare, which at the time was called Patty Cake Daycare. And when the police found it, they wrapped it in ice and went to the 7-Eleven here and put it inside a hot dog bag because they didn't really want a penis just out there for everyone to view. I went into 7-Eleven and I bought a hot dog. Now we'll go to the field. Behind me, 1993, this was a field. It's actually right next to the 7-Eleven. 7-Eleven's to this side of me. So this was a field, and this is where the penis was found, about 20 or 40 feet into the field. Now there's a fence there and a yard, and there's new developments. So they found the penis, and they loaded it into an ambulance. But before they did that, they went over to the 7-Eleven. I do wonder if they know that their yard was I guess not the final resting place, but a brief resting place for a penis. Well, I just talked to the neighbor of this house, and this guy has lived here forever. And it turns out, he says that the penis was not thrown in this yard. It was actually across the street, basically right next to where I was filming the yard. So we're going to walk over there and get a real good idea of where it was. I'm told that it was actually thrown over here, across the street from that house. Maybe it was this field? The guy that I talked to said that it was near this fire hydrant. But there's not really a field here. It's not too far off, you can do it. So I'm not sure if it's just kind of an idea where it was, although there is a stop sign here, so maybe that's more of what she was talking about. I don't know. No, she did say Maplewood Drive and Old Centerville Road, which is further behind me. So this is where the guy said, this is the field, I guess, that he says happened. He's lived here the whole time. He lived here, the guy I talked to, he lived here when this happened. So I would assume he knew. But it could be like somewhere around here. Nobody around here really knows about it unless they lived here. The people I talked to at 7-Eleven when I bought the hot dog, they weren't aware of it. So I brought the book in and I told them. I said it's the most famous 7-Eleven in the country. So when Robbie pulled into Prince William Medical Center, Prince William Hospital, John Bobbitt had lost a lot of blood. Eventually it was estimated that he lost about a third of his blood, which is pretty bad. I was interested to hear about how do you reattach a penis? Now, when he got there, they didn't know that they had found the penis. At this point, the doctors were just like, we need to stop this bleeding. It was explained to John Bobbitt that he would never have sex the same again. He would have to sit when he's peeing. Did he understand that? And then they essentially put him to sleep. After he was asleep, the penis was rushed to the hospital after they found it, after the police found it, and it was reattached. And when he woke up, he found out not only was he still alive and the surgery was successful, but they also reattached his penis. But how do they do that? I don't know. I don't know how they do that. I was really interested in that. Well, luckily, it's described in the testimony. So I'm going to read a little bit of that. It is going to be a little graphic, but I think it's interesting to hear about. So if you can handle it, then stick around for this part of it. Also, when it was amputated, the body starts to pull in. If you lose body parts, the body really wants to protect the entire body, loss of blood. So some of the stump that was left over retracted into the body. So they had to pull that back out and then reattach. And here's the answer that the doctor gave. This is Dr. Sine. Well, the penis is attached in several steps. The first step involves attaching the urethra, which transports urine and semen, and that is the largest tube. And that's attached over a catheter, which acts as a splint at the lower end of the penis. Nature, fortunately, has reserved the top of the penis for all of the very difficult smaller structures, the smaller arteries and nerves and veins. And so once the ventral half of the penis has been reattached successfully, we turn our attention to these very small structures at the top and begin the deep dorsal vein, which is a very important structure to reapproximate so that we have good outflow of blood. The arteries, though, also were attached dorsally. One deep corporal artery was reattached, as well as the dorsal nerves. The entire surgery took approximately 9 hours to do, following which the tourniquet was removed, and it was apparent there was good flow. So this is Dr. Sine. He is a surgeon, urology, and he was also assisted by Dr. David Berman, who had training in microvascular anastomosis. Interesting stuff. This would have been a fatal wound had he not had attention given to it. And the fact that they reattached it was amazing. Eventually, there's, I guess, a porn video that John Bobbitt did. So I guess it worked in the end. So that's it. Now, before I go, I want to bring up the original thumbnail that I created. I was coming at it from, let's say, a less mature point of view. Here it is. Now, just to be clear, that's not a penis I'm holding. That is a picture of a very white toe, not my toe, that I have edited to look like, I think, a severed penis that I've pixelated out. I'm also not holding the knife. I edited that in too. But I just decided that maybe it was just more appropriate to go with more of a conservative thumbnail for this video. That's what you got. Title of the book: The Bobbitt Case, You Decide. So you decide now. It's already been decided. But you can decide. But I think what's even more interesting is, what would you do if you were Lorena Bobbitt? Hopefully you would not do what John Bobbitt did. If you were Lorena Bobbitt and you found yourself in a situation where you were continually raped, abused, harassed, and you felt like you couldn't get away, what would you do if you had gone to the law and had some help, but still you were in a situation where you were at risk? What would you do? Maybe you wouldn't cut off a penis, but would you fight back? What would you do? And if the person was twice the size of you, what do you think you could do? And how would you judge somebody who did what she did? And what would you say about what John Bobbitt did? Because I think that's kind of the interesting thing about this is not what the court, what the jury came out with, but what the rest of the country thought. So 30 years later, what do you think? What would you decide? And what would you do? Thanks. Bye.
When you were here before, couldn't look you in the eye. You're just like an angel. Your skin makes me cry. You float like a feather in a beautiful world. I wish I was special. You're so fucking special.